It's similar to managing the communication, in prior to the COVID environment. You have to establish how the person wishes to communicate, what level they wish to communicate on. So when I meet a client, ask them those questions directly. Are you comfortable with this kind of communication? Do you want a weekly update? What's the cadence for meetings?
Welcome to CMC Live. This is the show where we discuss CMC regulations and guidances simplified through real-life experiences and risk-based advice. Each episode, we speak with subject matter experts as well as other leading industry authorities. With your host, Ed Narkey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CMC Live. Happy 2021. This is definitely not the start of our second season, a continuation of last year. So we have a few more podcasts to fill before we start to reformat things and do some more interesting things. So anyway, today I wanted to talk a bit about, how project management fits into the drug development continuum. And we'll have a guest on shortly here, Paul Long, who has some great history and experiences. So once upon a time, this was the way of things. Most projects happened in-house, or at least locally, and the activities they required weren't very complicated, or some folks didn't think they were. In today's global pharma environment with the pandemic, even, the days of such simplicity are pretty much gone. So instead, now the +1 person in the N+1 equation is the glue that holds the complex activities together for a company, if you think about it. And that person, is typically called project manager. So simply stated, project management, what is that? PMing, right? It's the management of people, activities, time, and money towards the successful completion of any stated goal, right? So that sounds easy, and we do it all the time in our daily lives with our families, for example. But it's imperative in the complex world of pharmaceuticals and biotechs to have a single point person responsible for ensuring that the all the pieces of a project come together efficiently, effectively, and on schedule. So picture this. First, consider the management of people. Imagine that you're a team leader of a group responsible for delivering a phase 1 clinical trial material, say an antibody, in this case, antibody product. You're excited to be chosen as a team leader, of course, because it's an excellent chance to develop your career and, get that exposure and experience and do your craft. But of course, it comes in addition to your regular technical responsibilities. You have another role, right? You're person responsible for the expression, filtration, and purification of that antibody, let's say. So as a team leader, you need to coordinate with the various functions, including the groups, the analysts, the analytical formulators, the clinical manufacturing personnel, even the clinicians in some instances, all in order to outline activities that must be accomplished to get the product to the clinic in the supply chain. So you meet with your team every week to discuss the status of the program. You go through the chart step by step to ensure that everyone is working together, to meet this impossible deadline, of course. The work's hard, intense, and time-consuming, but, progress is generally made. You have a cohesive team progressing at an acceptable pace. So it sounds easy, right? So the classic view, and this is still the case and probably always will be, management comes in and asks you, how many technical personnel does it take to complete a project when there's a kickoff? And of course, the answer here is, X number, and, they come back with, we'll throw as many people in as it takes to get the product out the door and get the job done. So that's obvious, the technical skill sets, subject matter experts are recognized. So then you ask them, how many project managers does it take to complete this project can we have? And they say 0. And they say, they don't do anything really meaningful anyway, do they? And we've all had experiences with PMing and Gantt charts, and we can talk to that. But the reality is that the value of a project manager, especially a good one, is probably it's under-recognized. So in that example, now that the antibody is in the process, it's purified, and it's passed off to the analytical and the formulators. They work with the clinical manufacturing group to scale it up and make the full formulation batches. The product goes to release testing labs. At the same time, it goes to the packaging group for labeling. The drug, hopefully it's found to be within specifications and can be released for shipping, to the appropriate test sites and clinical trial sites, just as the flow chart says, and just in time. Well, that would be ideal. But someone forgot to include shipping personnel in the project team, so they would know that this particular antibody had to be kept cold, for example, and this happens. Neither were they told that the product couldn't be shipped on Fridays because no one would be at the clinic to receive it over the weekend and store it at the 5 degrees required. So in this case, for example, seen this before, the precious drug was shipped at ambient summer temperatures and sat on a loading dock for 48 hours over the weekend. And no. So you get a call Monday morning and find out the whole clinical program is now delayed by months because no one managed the shipping department. And this is the moment when you, as a team leader, wish that you had a project manager on the case, right? So 2 things in my mind that project managers do. Do things meaningful, and they manage resources in essence, right? So among other things, doing something meaningful for sure. Project manager role and responsibility is to ask questions of the project team, to ensure all the appropriate steps are taken and the program is executed as expected. So this person's role also includes outlining all pertinent operations, keeping track of how they interact with one another, and making sure all the appropriate people, in fact, are included and informed, and also have approved on things, right, for the process. So, for example, the project manager could have apprised the shipping department of that hypothetical drugs logistics issues, and that 2 or 3 month delay and countless dollars in costs would probably have been reverted. So PM activities extend not only to the team responsible for the technical operations, the scientists, the manufacturing folks, the shipping personnel, but this also includes the management team, the strategy operations side as well, upper management, upper executives, who typically establish a program definition in the first place, and they have the say on when things happen, of course, and needs, right? So there's the strategic vision needs to be translated and communicated to the tactical teams, so all involved are clear about the expectations. And that's the project manager's responsibility to take that vision and track it for the team, to ensure that the members stay true to their intentions. So project manager can also help prepare and present their strategy for the overall plans and mitigation of risks to upper management. And I'll get on this later for crisis management. I think a synonym for sometimes for good project managers. So finally, something goes wrong, and inevitably will if anyone's worked in drug development. The project manager is often faced with tempering the expectations of from upper management, so that they understand what has happened and why. So in many companies, team leaders double as project managers again. And sometimes this works, especially if these people are well versed in the entire chain of events from start to finish of the program, including events, of course, outside their own areas of expertise. Often, however, the team leader also has his or her own activities to address and to do and carry out, which again consumes a lot of the time and effort beyond project management. So it can help a team tremendously to have one person, that is, who's fully and completely responsible for managing all activities and communications through meetings, minutes, any other interactions. An assigned project manager can also track the details of all resources, personnel and otherwise. And then on top of that, doing something meaningful, which I kind of outlined there, and clearly, talked about the importance, managing those resources, the second branch of a PM, I would think. We can talk to Paul about this. Credit for the introduction of current project management practices goes to Harry Gant. If anyone knows that name, as it's familiar, he's the industrial engineer who introduced that famous Gantt chart nearly 100 years ago. Computer simulations and new software available, obviously. But, that all said, and we'll save our conversations, our thoughts on what we think of Gantt charts. But, communications is the key. So Gantt charts are kind of a means to an end. So they can track just a few tasks or delineate a plethora of tasks, and they're still very useful if used properly. And the number of tasks included should reflect only those needed, though, to ensure the proper communications, So at critical junctures, some details may need to be added, such as the shipping, in the example that I mentioned. If that improves performance, then you do it. If you find, however, that your team spends more time updating its Gantt chart than doing the actual work it's meant to track, then use some other tool. And there are a plethora of things out there right now. So today we have Paul Long, exactly, on the podcast. So Ed, who is myself, I can share a few great stories about how I met Paul and got to know him a little bit, but I'll do that later. Just some background. Paul has supervised governmental, regulatory, pharmaceutical industries, clear business process person, 20 years plus. And his skills, I would say, are managing interdependencies of manufacturing and regulatory teams, to drive a drug development program. Currently, he directs cross-functional teams here, matches the desired technical expertise works with the customer and the partner to execute the work plan to meet the project deadlines. Very important. He prioritizes, and he's good at this, the importance of budgets, scope of work, making sure they're aligned and kept in check. And then the endpoints by targeting the client's strategic goals to understand where the projects fit into the portfolio and timing. He also does a really good job of monitoring the impact of any changes on the risks and minimizes the impact, hopefully, to the project scope in order to make the project more successful. So Paul, let's get to this episode. Let's get it started by going into some of your background, some of your experiences, and what you do. So how'd you get started, and what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning to everybody. My background comes from a lot of life science experience. And along the way, I have a pretty well-rounded resume. I've done a lot of IT work. I've done a lot of clinical work. I began in the emergency department of a hospital and worked my way up through management directorships and spent a lot of time consulting on the operational side. During that journey, I obtained my project management professional certification. I also have an agile certification. Became involved in the pharmaceutical industry a few years back, working with a major consulting firm. And I spent time at a very large global pharmaceutical in their regulatory department. That exposed me to that side of the work, and I gained a lot of knowledge, and I have to thank the people who helped me along the way. Began working with PCI about a year and a half ago, began working with DSI, lucky enough to run into Brian and Ed through a common contact, and immediately was placed on some of the regulatory filing work, done a number of INDs, IND amendments, had a successful BLA submission recently, and have been lucky enough to work with a lot of smart people at DSI, and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, both of you.
So, okay, Paul, the one thing, if you look at your career and you match it up against what you're doing now, one of the things that really jumps out in a typical project management environment, you have aspects of it that are virtual. There are aspects of it that are conference calls, especially in today's climate. It's become very, very normal. But with DSI, you're working completely virtual. So when you look at the types of clients that we have, they're both small and medium-sized companies. When you, given all of your background, all of your qualifications as a project manager, what are some of the benefits of being completely virtual as a project manager?
I'm lucky enough to have been a virtual project manager for a while now before I joined DSI. And what I'm finding about that is, of course, it saves travel time, it saves things like that, but there are challenges there. And it's not much different from the same challenges that you have when you're in place in real time. It's communication, it's visibility, it's transparency. What I've found at DSI is most of the people that we work with here are virtual and are used to that environment. There are some tasks that we've always performed on site, CMO audits, site visits, things like that. But we're fairly comfortable with the virtual environment. That allows us to be flexible in who we staff. That's a plus. It allows us to be flexible in our time. When there is a global project, we are in the same environment in our home offices or wherever we are and able to join those things. That flexibility has always been there with DSI. I think what we're seeing now in the change in environment is more of our clients joining that virtual team where they've been consolidated at a single site with their organization. Now we're able to bring them into more of the virtual environment and they're becoming comfortable. Something that DSI is good at, and we're bringing our clients along.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. I think you're right. I think the one thing to not lose sight of is the fact that you can be flexible in your project teams, bring people on, and that's often appealing to various companies and their budgets. I think having that flexibility virtually is important. Now, you kind of touched on what are some of the challenges, say, to traditional project management and completely virtual? And let's start first with just internal challenges you have in project management.
Well, the first, I always start with communication. Communication is key, and establishing communication. And in a virtual environment, there's a little bit of a challenge there. When you're in person, There's a quick read, there's an easier read to the person, the people around you and your teammates. And that involves knowing how people are comfortable with communication, what level of communication they need, whether you're communicating to a peer, to a client, to a C-suite level, to a, let's say, a SME level. You have to establish how you're going to communicate, and everybody has to be comfortable and understand how that communication will occur. It's easier when you're face-to-face. Visiting a client, I used to find a lot of value in that. I don't get to do that now. But what we've moved towards, these virtual communications, people are becoming more comfortable with the virtual communication. And by that, I mean the different, there are enough platforms now, whether it's a webcast, Teams, the Zoom, whatever you're using, people are becoming more comfortable with turning the video on. We're seeing each other. That's not exactly virtual in the sense that, I see your face now. I know what your expression is. You see me. We get to know each other a little bit better in these meetings. And I see people becoming more comfortable with that.
So that's really, it is. It's much different than the traditional conference call. And there's something to be said for that. And it was, if you realize at the beginning of COVID and the beginning of all of this isolation that we're all actually become pseudo accustomed to, no one used their cameras. They really didn't. They didn't use their cameras until you started asking and people started feeling comfortable. But I think you're absolutely right. It opens up much more in terms of interpersonal relationships because you can see them. And it's somewhat disarming if you can see the person on the other side.
And it makes me more comfortable with who I'm speaking to. I also find more and more people are quicker. Maybe they're getting to know us, and some of our SMEs are getting to know me. I have people picking up the phone and calling me more often. Mm-hmm. They know they can do that. And maybe it's because we've met in video chat and we've talked to each other. They see the kind of person I am.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think it's an evolution, right? It really has been. And I feel as though now we're kind of hitting our stride virtually where this stuff just becomes the norm. Now, the other part of this, though, is clients. And clients come in all shapes and sizes. And when you're working with them virtually, some are more adept to working virtually, some are not. So how do you manage that?
It's similar to managing the communication, in prior to the COVID environment. You have to establish how the person wishes to communicate, what level they wish to communicate on. So when I meet a client, ask them those questions directly. Are you comfortable with this kind of communication? Do you want a weekly update? What's the cadence for meetings? How do you want meetings to be held? What kind of an agenda do you want? And it's those same questions. And this time, instead of setting up a meeting, which is just a phone call or a meeting in person, it's setting up a meeting that involves the possibility of video too. I find that our clients are pretty quick to use the video, and I think they appreciate seeing our faces and seeing our expressions. When it involves a third party, a CMO, I find that the CMOs come on board with the video a little bit later. But I think that helps everybody to join as a team. And I encourage that.
Now, okay, so I think that's a really good point. And now you've set the parameters, you move forward with projects, you have the relationships internally already built in. And if all is right with the world, then we move forward. Now, in that vein, and the reason I'm asking you these questions is because folks that are listening to the podcast, one of the things that I've learned over time is that people often question the value of project management. We're challenged with it every day where someone will say, really, why do I need a project manager? Because I'm doing this aspect of this project on the side and it's going just fine. And, I used to struggle with that response, kind of a just wait and see, and it'll become clear to you very soon why you need a project manager. But let's say you're in a situation now, you got these relationships established, all the introductions are done. What tools can you use in a project? Do you find that you use often to really set the tempo and the expectations for how the project's going to be run?
Personal tools or physical tools, online tools are all part of it. Yes. I like to keep things moving. And very often there's a funnel. Funnels occur because the SMEs are working different projects. The funnels occur because our clients have multiple tasks to perform. I'm not their only interest. And I am able to keep that focus going. So what I try to do is keep track of what are the dates and what are we shooting for. And I have to integrate our team and the client's needs into a common goal and make sure we're meeting them. Plenty of things can happen. We've had clients hit by COVID internally. We've had learning curves on systems and platforms. All of those things can delay or can, create roadblocks to getting things done. And it's not just that, it's bringing the people into the meetings at the correct time. There are reviews going on both sides. Sometimes those reviews can be delayed. People have other priorities. Unexpected things happen. And knowing how to keep that schedule going, for instance, on a current briefing book, it's going back between a global organization. We have people reviewing the document on our side here in the United States. We have people on their side in the United States and also on different continents. They all have their own schedules, and knowing and communicating when those things will happen and making sure that the handoffs happen keeps this moving to the point that we're going to make a predetermined goal that was kind of shot out in the air. And I'm very happy about that. And I think the client and the people too appreciate that what we've done is be able to keep everybody coordinated and meet that time goal.
Yeah, so if I can add some things, I wanted to come back. And certainly things have evolved. Technology has evolved. Talking to folks 1 year ago, we would have never predicted that we would be doing a podcast here alone, talking about meeting people on screen. So, once upon a time, there was a way of things, right? Most projects happened in-house. When I got started, I went to an office, there was a PM, there was folks around the table in a conference room. At least locally, you would have folks dial in. But not so much the case. So we have jumped ahead of the telephone call. There is some benefits to have video screens. And as Brian mentioned, I want to pull these two together. There is a value and importance of having a project manager in any project. So simply stated, what is project management? I, kind of battered this around for my whole career here. Managing people, activities, time, money, budget, scope of work, to complete the goal. So it sounds easy. I think we all do this in our daily lives, right? We get out of bed and literally we're all project managers, some better than others, right? So I kind of wanted to talk to Paul. You have some good history with us now, working with small emerging biotechs, very innovative, very forward thinking, moving very fast, and a lot of times with limited budget. Can you give us some, loose examples of how project management fits into this drug development continuum? Maybe some things that you kind of see from that side that, maybe folks out there listening to the podcast can appreciate, or actually can maybe just, trigger something about it that might help them. As Brian mentioned, a lot of folks look at it as overhead. They're hiring folks, subject matter experts that are going to do something in a chair. But, like anything, like a team, if without a coach, without a, manager, for example, sometimes there's incohesiveness there, right? There's not a plan. It's not communicated. So can you talk to us about, your role and maybe some of the projects that you've worked on without details? How does that role fit into the drug development process?
Well, we're seeing a lot of the challenges haven't changed with COVID, but the environment, our work environment has. So a lot of it is still coordination between the different working parts and the client, and we help out with that. On our side, we're very communicative, and one of the things that we do try to do is have an internal cadence and discussion between the different areas: regulatory, drug substance, drug product, quality assurance. We have multiple SMEs working for a client. We find that it's helpful for ourselves to sit and talk about what's going on, and a lot of cross-sharing of information. I find that mirrors what's going on in the client sometimes. And I find clients that we can often help by improving their internal communications when we talk about what we're seeing in different areas in our own discussions. For instance, linking up the clinical, the supply chain, along with some of the drug substance, drug product supply chain. Sometimes, very often recently, we found that we've been able to help on the dependencies there. Documentation dependencies that are affecting the clinical supply and the depots and what's going on as they try to move things into clinical trials in different areas of the world. Again, it comes down to communication, transparency, open discussion. And that's one of the things that I try as a project manager to drive, make sure that the right people are talking.
We asked the question briefly about, what tools do you use? But I know that there's always flexibility with our clients and preferred tools to use. But have you found anything to be a very effective project management tool, particularly just from my own knowledge?
With everybody going virtual, there are some tools that we all use when we're sitting in the same room, desktop tools, things. And a lot of this, most of it is moving to web-based, cloud-based. There are questions about that I won't discuss here, the security, the logins and all that affects our work though. I'm probably using, and you're probably using maybe 4 or 5 different platforms for video conferencing right now, depending on who's on the call and who schedules it. But what I'm finding on the project management side now is that people are exploring different tools to support the collaborative effort. And that's not just the work plan, which in the old days was always, MS Project. Everybody knew MS Project or Jira and a few others. But now people are looking at the web-based versions of those, for instance, Office 365 and Teams. But there are other products on the market now that have some advantages and make it easy to collaborate and share these tools inside and even outside the organization that we're using. For instance, at DSI, we've begun experimenting, and some of our clients are already using this with us, something called Smartsheet. I've used some other products as well. Those tools change the game when you're able to share things that way and look at the same project plan. These new project planning tools also allow us to create dependencies across organizations if we use them right. There are what I would call social networking aspects to them and tracking aspects outside of the project plan where people can collaborate and have discussion groups online, project teams,
right?
Much like social networking.
Okay, so I just got a note from one of the listeners, and there's a question for you, Paul. The utility of a Gantt chart. So most oftentimes, good question here, right? I associate myself, the Gantt chart, with project management. Can you tell us, has the Gantt chart changed in the virtual worlds? Is that something that's still, kind of common use? Is there other things out there that kind of take the place of the Gantt chart?
No, I don't think the Gantt chart goes away. I think it becomes easier to use. I didn't like the Gantt chart in certain of the older platforms. I can produce one easier in some of the new tools. I think more importantly, are you producing the right Gantt chart for the right audience? Do you have the correct milestones on there? Is there a discussion at what level, what you're tracking? The roadmap for the C-suite looks different than the roadmap for the drug product people. So I think the use of the Gantt chart only expands as the tools make it easier to produce them and to use and to update them.
Yeah, I think we've seen where Gantt charts, they have to still serve a purpose. I mean, we've seen also where they've taken on a life of their own and they're now consuming resources just on the status of the Gantt chart. And you have to step back and look, is the tool really serving the purpose? And I think that's what gains the respect of the client and of the internal team members if you've got a tool that people really can base decisions off of. But I think to your point, Paul, that easier to use makes it a little more efficient, a little more effective. And that's really what it becomes. But I think to caution, you really have to look at how the tools are used to make sure they don't consume resources just on that alone,
Same thing, Brian. And we might not just say Gantt chart, but what we're also looking at now are some of the dashboards. Mm-hmm. And in past jobs, I would produce monthly dashboards that might take me all week to produce.
Yeah.
I don't like spending my time that way. And some of these new tools, these collaborative tools, can be set up to produce dashboards on demand. If you're not doing that, you should question, is there a better tool? Why do I have people spending? I don't want to spend my time, client time, creating a dashboard. I want to run a dashboard.
Yeah.
I want to set that dashboard up once. I want to set that Gantt chart up to where it pulls milestones, and all I have to do is hit a button once a month and say, here's the dashboard, here's what we expected, here's where we are.
Yeah, it becomes meaningful. Yeah, good point. Good point. Okay, so we've talked a lot about some of the aspects of working virtually, pros and cons, some of the tools that we use. If you were to sum it up and you were to say, why is project management important? And because think about the audience at sometimes, because like I said at the beginning of the call, you've got folks that may question the need for it. Is it cost effective to have project management? Is it another layer? People are always very adverse to layers. So what would you say in terms of what's the benefit of effective project management?
Risk management, that things don't go awry, that someone is stepping back and taking that look at the pieces, the dependencies. Keeping the communication up avoids risk. We don't want surprises unless they're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Boring is okay. Exactly.
Boring is great. It went exactly as expected. We recognize something going wrong in the middle of the project, and we're able to mitigate that. We're able to inform the affected parties.
Yeah.
That doesn't occur without someone taking a step back from time to time, on a weekly basis, talking to the client, saying things are going well. If it keeps that boring look up, great.
Yeah. No, I think it's very well put. You're right. I mean, I think it comes down to it's risk mitigation, it's efficiencies that are built into the processes. It's all those things that we mentioned at the top of the podcast, because I think people do it as a side job, so to speak, to what their other projects, whether it's the lead chemist on a project or it's someone who's been given the project in regulatory. There's so many other aspects to run, and CMC is a very broad term, right? I mean, it covers a lot of different areas. I think one of the advantages to effective project management that you touched on is it really letting them know there's a central point of contact. Because if the need changes and there's an expanded need or reduced scope, they have one person to talk to. And I think that really resonates with clients that, when I'm in trouble, or if I have a question, or if my board's asking a question, I have one phone number to call. And if that person doesn't know the answer, they can certainly find it. And I think that really kind of sums up effective project management. Absolutely.
I agree, Brian. And as you mentioned earlier and often, the classic view of a PM, right? You start a project, how many technical experts do we need to complete the project? We need N+1. That's great. We know what we need to do here. And then the next question, how many project managers do we need a project manager to complete? How many, right? How many do we need? 0. They don't do anything meaningfully anyway, right? And that's normally the train of thought. But there is a meaningful, sometimes I call it crisis management. The folks that were good PMs that I worked with over the years, the really good ones, really kind of took a crisis and diffused it, and then made the goal happen. So with that, I guess we can go in a little bit into how I got to know Paul, kind of assimilate this. I always kind of find analogies to his work here as a project manager. Over the summer, we went deep sea fishing, and we started off getting up early in the morning. I brought my 2 sons with me, and Paul was very organized. We only went on a certain day with a certain water situation, and had to be the right circumstances. So he navigated us out to a wreck off of the Atlantic City, I guess, area. By the way, Paul's from Summers Point, New Jersey, very nice town down there. But anyway, what was the name of the wreck, by the way? Do you remember, Paul?
It'll come back to me. We were about, I'd say 30 miles offshore.
Yeah, 30 miles, and it was a pleasant day. But of course, myself and my family have genes for seasickness, apparently. So long and short of it, I'll end the story. But we were successful in getting some fish, got back safely, and kind of akin to what Paul does here. As far as projects go, he does make sure that the goal is set and made and delivered. So that said, if it didn't come back to you, I'll have to look it up and we'll put it on the podcast notes. Yep. At this point, any other questions? Just general one-off funny jokes? Anybody add anything?
I'd like to make one point too, that sometimes there's the question, and you asked, what do I need a project manager for? And I want to differentiate between a project coordinator and a project manager. It's not simply coordination skills. It's not keeping the dates, making the meetings. That's one of the things I take care of, and I think I'm okay at that. But it's also the soft skills. And sometimes that means dealing with a personality. Sometimes that means recognizing a personal issue on your team and helping that person out. And that only comes through time and experiencing some of those things and being able to support your team as well as the client in that mode.
That's a great point. Okay, Paul, with that, thanks again. It was great to have you, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. So, in summary, project management and pharmaceutical development, drug development. So we covered a few things this week. Project manager is best served with good working knowledge of the drug development process. That's first and most important. Such knowledge will help him or her map out goals and understand what they mean to a company, as well as what resources are required to reach any goals, and estimate how much time and money will be required to attain these goals. So each company has its own estimates, but these type of tasks are all the same for drug development. Different types of products, but more or less the same pathway from phase 1 to commercial. So throughout that process, a company maintains or should maintain a contact with the regulatory agencies. We mentioned this in previous podcasts. And obviously file, appropriately time-wise as well, the appropriate documents at each stage, keep the FDA on, or the EMA on the same page as they're, part of the team, essentially. And so, for example, you're going to want to file an IND. Obviously, you need to have an IND open to run a study, but then you're building towards your NDA, your BLA, your marketing application, and there's a lot of documentation, decisions that happen along the way. And I think project management has a role there. Some project-related and project management considerations that we covered here. Project definition, defining scope and timeline, module approach to completion of these tasks, including any tools. We talked a little bit about Gantt charts. Resources, personnel, and flexibility in the mode of execution. So there's also a project risk analysis involvement here, appropriate risk assessment, mitigation plans to minimize risk, contingency plans to minimize impact of risks that occur. And again, defining a communication pathway. This is where a good project manager is valuable. Opening communication channels through the project continuum, trying to minimize hierarchy, trying to define expectations of the team, defining those, results-oriented rather than task-oriented is important. Emails, phone numbers, those type of things like that. The new softwares, having someone that's attuned to those things and can pull a team together. So we didn't mention too much of it, but besides the current climate out there with the pandemic, it's always been the case here. Additional challenges, especially now, the new way of drug development, where most, if not all, is outsourced. Most of this discussion here, or in the past, assumed that the team members were all employed by the same company. Often, however, especially now, that's not the case. Even though that they may share the same overall goal. So even so, savvy project managers know that their companies may not share quite the same interests. And this is especially true when you're working with a CRO, contract research organization, or a CMO. And when they're involved, project managers and all companies share the same challenges, obviously, to ensure that their team members work towards the common goal despite uncommon interests. So this is even more of a challenge in acquisitions and mergers. Managing a program when a company is being taken over and its personnel aren't certain of their personal and financial future changes from simply tracking activities and resources into coaching each member toward the goal based on the personal integrity of the person. The politics of a merger can obviously either energize or denigrate the energy and synergy of a project team. So, to have someone there that has a good handle on that and keep the team together is certainly important. In the end, communication and commitment are key for all teams in anything we do here, any technical function, but especially for the project manager. And their dream is to, I guess, talking to a couple project managers, to lead team members who communicate and perform, even when it's personally inconvenient. It's easier for them too, right? And that all benefits the team and its goal. So whose side are you on anyway? In today's environment, companies often outsource the work to optimize materials, equipment, and time. When a program moves outside of a company, its project team relies on outside team members to engage and execute toward the goal with that same level of commitment as internal team members. So lastly, crisis management, obviously it's an additional challenge. It's probably should be its own role right now, but a good PM could kind of conquer this. Your program proceeds along the Gantt chart, that you developed from the start. Potential delays due to misalignment of any CMC resources, CMO resources, for example, and efforts have been averted. Smooth sailing, right? Well, if it all goes well, yes, but not necessarily. You'll have, because the project manager can provide the necessary assistance, you can provide the salient points as management communication meetings as needed, with minimal interruptions as you apply yourself to resolving any technical projects here. So the project manager helps to organize and run any technical meetings, cohesively communicates, provides agenda, meeting minutes, so that all activities are documented. Similarly, he or she can assure that your quality unit remains up to speed on development at hand. You're in line with the agency, and it helps your team ensure that the quality requirements for documentation and investigation are all adequately met on time according to the the expectations. So the best +1 people to finalize, the consideration box, if you will, list the basic attributes of good project management and by extension a good project manager. But a highly complex project needs a defined scope and definitive deliverables. Without those, it constitutes an operational activity that may not work. So a project manager should have long-range perspective on the entire project. Quite essential. He or she is not only anticipating the next hurdle, but also ensuring that the team negotiates all relevant hurdles. A project manager needs to be strong and directive, but restrained in decision-making, allowing the project team to weigh in and create a path forward to ensure a fully developed response to any issues that come up or issues that come about. And lines of communication must be open. And a healthy dialogue among team members is very essential. So when a project is well managed, its goals met on time and within budget, the results will be of quality, a good program that's not delayed, and everyone should get credit for this with a good, strong project manager. So with that said, I know it was a long-winded ending, but thank you again for reaching us here on 2021. We'll have numerous other podcasts coming up. Season 2 is a little bit special. We will be changing the format. So in the meantime, hopefully you enjoyed this one. Please go back and listen to any of our other podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. So next week, I'll be talking with Miranda, again, on some of the importance of regulatory strategy and actually some examples of where I learned my regulatory work and a lot of discussion on some of my mentors and what I learned from them. So how can you make sure your product gets to market so quickly and efficiently as possible? The keyword is regulatory strategy. So without a strategy, you'll be unable to anticipate challenges and important submission requirements. So let us know what you think, guys, of the topics. We love your feedback. We love your comments. You frequently make us laugh with some of the responses, or make us think about things we haven't thought about, new ideas. Very important. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and get notified immediately when the premiere of the next episode of CMC Live is out. It's the only forum out there, I think, so far that talks about this stuff. We also would love to have maybe potential guests out there in industry. We see a lot of other content on YouTube, and hopefully that we can build this here as a resource for most of us. It's an amazing thing. We all to you, of course, and the folks that work in the industry. If you like the show and you're into it, share it widely. Come back next episode for another episode of CMC Live. Miranda and Brian and I will see you then. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening. To read the full show notes for this episode, which include a summary, timestamps, and any links mentioned in this episode, please visit dsinformatics.com/podcast. There you'll find the information from this episode and any past episodes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a rating and a review at ratethispodcast.com/CMC Live. We'll be sure to read these out on future episodes.